So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine starting your business career
Hmm.
as a child entrepreneur.
Not just any entrepreneur.
Right. Buying cheap boxes of sugar candies and then, selling them one by one for a tiny profit to your classmates
Hmm.
in primary school. That's the hustle.
And now I want you to fast forward maybe 60 years. That exact same man is the driving force behind a single industrial complex, a refinery, a fertilizer plant, a petrochemical hub, all of it, valued at over 20 billion US dollars.
That's just staggering.
It is the largest single industrial project in the entire history of the African continent, and its main goal. It's explicitly designed to make a nation of over 220 million people completely independent for its fuel.
Okay, let's really unpack this. We are talking about Aliko Dangote, born in 1957 in Kano, Nigeria.
And he is, consistently ranked as the wealthiest black person in the world, but calling him wealthy it's almost an understatement.
It is. He's an economic phenomenon. I mean, his business decisions don't just move stock prices.
No, they literally reshape national infrastructure. They affect currency stability, geopolitics, all across West Africa.
So our mission in this deep dive is to trace that incredible journey from the little boxes of candy to this colossal industrial empire.
And this is far more than a simple biography about accumulating wealth. It's a really, really complex narrative.
It has to be.
It involves generational commercial knowledge, calculated strategic risk-taking that would honestly terrify most investors.
I can imagine.
And it's about the basic logic of industrial development in the developing world and the immense, sometimes controversial political and economic power you need to dominate these essential sectors across modern Africa.
So the central question we are tackling today for you, the listener, is this. How does a relatively simple commodity trader evolve into the literal architect of his nation's industrialization? How does someone leverage an initial loan, measured in the thousands, into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that basically dictates market conditions for cement, for sugar, and now for fuel? That's where we have to begin, with the deep roots of commerce.
To really get your head around the scale of the Dangote Group today, you can't treat Aliko Dangote as some kind of rags to riches story. It's just not accurate.
He didn't just emerge from a vacuum.
Not at all. His success is built on a very deep foundation, specifically in what we can, I think, accurately describe as a privileged commercial cradle in Kano.
And it's so important to spend a moment establishing the context of Kano. For centuries, I mean, way before European influence, this city was the beating heart of the trans-Saharan trade routes.
The absolute nexus.
It was the hub for goods moving between North Africa and, the forests of West Africa. This wasn't just a place where trade happened.
No, it was a civilization built on complex, massive, multi-regional commerce. And that's why his family background is so critical to the story.
He was born into a prominent Hausa Muslim family of merchants,
where commercial literacy was it was the native language. They didn't just do small-scale deals, they managed vast, intricate networks.
And even his name, Aliko, which his maternal grandfather gave him, it carries so much weight.
It means the victorious one who defends humanity.
Which, looking back now, given what he does, providing cement for shelter, sugar for food, fuel for transport, it almost sounds like a mandate, doesn't it?
It really does. And while his immediate family were entrepreneurs too, his mother, Maria Dangote, was a businesswoman, and his father, Mohammed Dangote, owned a transport company. The real blueprint for what he would become, the continental scale that came from his maternal great-grandfather.
We absolutely have to highlight Alassane Abdullahi Dangote. This figure is so crucial because he set the precedent.
He really did.
Until his death in 1955, just 2 years before Aliko was born, Dangote was arguably the wealthiest person in all of West Africa. I mean, his fortune wasn't just big for the region, it was massive on a global scale.
And Dangote made his fortune primarily in large-scale commodity trading, but let's just put that into context for a moment.
Okay.
We're talking about the era of the famous groundnut pyramids of Kano.
Right, I've seen pictures. They're incredible.
They're literally massive, towering stacks of bagged groundnuts just waiting for export, often stored outside simply because the scale of production was so immense. Dangote controlled key parts of this supply chain, dealing in commodities like groundnuts and kola nuts.
So this wasn't just buying and selling.
Oh, no, this was managing incredibly sophisticated logistics, political relationships, credit lines, all across multiple territories.
So Dangote inherited not just money, but a legacy of immense wealth that came from mastering huge strategic commodity trading. It was just normalized in his family that one person could control a supply chain vital to millions.
And that tradition continued. After his father passed away in 1965, he was raised by his maternal grandfather, Sanusi Dantata.
Who he himself credits as a crucial, influential figure in his formative years.
And Sanusi Dantata, an equally skilled merchant, provided that direct, hands-on mentorship. It was like the transfer of a commercial dynasty's entire mindset.
What was that mindset?
It was a focus on reliability, on logistics, and on capitalizing on the supply and demand imbalances that are just inherent in a rapidly developing economy. This was the perfect training ground for nurturing that entrepreneurial instinct.
And we see that instinct show up incredibly early, don't we? That famous anecdote we started with.
Yeah.
It's more than just a cute story. It's really a foundational lesson in arbitrage.
Precisely. His memory was, and I'm quoting him here, "I remember when I was in primary school, I would buy boxes of sugar candy and I would sell them to get money. I was so interested in business even back then."
And that seemingly small action, it reveals two huge strategic insights that would define his entire career.
What's the first one?
First, arbitrage. He understood the spread, the difference between the bulk price and the individual retail price, and he exploited that market inefficiency to make a profit.
Simple but brilliant. And the second?
Second, and this is probably more important for his later career, he targeted high-demand, non-negotiable consumer goods.
Essentials?
Exactly. Sugar candy is a commodity kids will always want. Later, his business would focus on adult necessities, literal sugar, salt, cement. He learned very early to bet on essentials where the demand is inelastic.
His formal education then came in and provided the academic framework for this practical drive he already had.
Right. He started in the madrasa, went through standard schooling, and then culminated his studies with a bachelor's degree in business studies and administration from Al-Azhar University in Cairo.
So that gave him the structure, the finance theory, administration, logistics, to match the instincts he'd been honing since childhood.
And this brings us to the crucial turning point, 1977.
He's 20 years old, he's armed with his education and his family heritage, and he takes the leap. He secures an initial capital loan of $3,000 from his uncle, Sanusi Dantata.
$3,000. Now, that's a large sum for a young man at the time, for sure. But it's a relatively small seed fund for what would become one of the world's largest fortunes.
It really is. It underscores that while he was privileged, the incredible growth that followed was fueled by his strategy, not just inheritance.
Absolutely. And the focus of his new company, the Dangote Group, was crystal clear.
Strictly commodity trading, just like his great-grandfather, but modernized for Nigeria's contemporary needs. He focused on importing essential high-volume goods: sugar, salt, flour, rice.
He was directly addressing Nigeria's huge import dependence and the high domestic demand for these necessities.
That strategy, betting on national necessities, it's genius in its simplicity. If the economy is booming, people need basic materials to build. If the economy falters, people still need basic food.
It's recession-proof to a degree.
It was a low-risk, high-volume, high-demand strategy that allowed him to control the distribution network very early on, and the growth. It was phenomenal. The profits just flowed in, which enabled massive reinvestment.
So how quickly did that initial $3,000 investment translate into a significant enterprise?
Incredibly fast, within just 4 years. By 1981, he had already founded Dangote Nigeria Limited and Blue Star Services, and he was expanding his scope significantly.
So he moved beyond just food.
Yes, he moved beyond consumables and started importing bulk materials crucial for industrial and infrastructure development, things like steel and aluminum.
He was rapidly positioning himself as the essential logistical link, the key importer for Nigeria's consumption and its construction boom.
And that initial period really established his reputation for reliability and his ability to handle just vast quantities of goods.
So by the early 1980s, he's already an established, wealthy, and powerful trader. But the real strategic masterstroke, that was still ahead.
By the mid-1980s, Dangote was operating this highly successful trading machine. He was generating substantial profits just by importing essentials and taking a margin.
And most wealthy importers, they just stop right there. I mean, why would you risk your capital on manufacturing when trading is safe and so lucrative?
Exactly. But Dangote made a monumental pivot, what we're calling the Great Pivot, from being just a profitable trader to becoming an industrial titan who manufactures the very goods he once imported.
And this pivot wasn't arbitrary, was it? It was born out of a strategic, almost nationalistic realization. What was that core idea?
The core idea was understanding that relying on imports created inherent inefficiency, massive capital flight, and critically, a huge national vulnerability.
Right. Every dollar you spend importing sugar or cement is a dollar that leaves the Nigerian economy.
And it strengthens another nation's manufacturing base. Dangote's clear, uncompromising vision was to replace that import dependency with massive indigenous local production.
He saw the systematic risk in importation delays, currency fluctuations, all of it.
And geopolitical uncertainty. He decided the only way to eliminate that risk was to control the entire process domestically, from start to finish.
This brings us squarely to the defining principle of his empire: vertical integration. We've mentioned it, but we really need to dive deep into what this means in his context.
Okay, so vertical integration in the Nigerian context is both a defensive and an offensive strategy at the same time.
How so?
Defensively, it means controlling the entire value chain, from sourcing the raw material, like limestone for cement or sugarcane for sugar, to manufacturing the product, packaging it, and finally distributing it with his own logistics network.
What's the offensive advantage of doing all that?
It's about cost optimization and market domination. By controlling every single step, he eliminates multiple levels of profit margin that would otherwise go to external suppliers, distributors, logistics firms.
So he can produce at a lower cost than any potential competitor who still relies on imports.
Exactly. Or even fragmented local supply chains. He can dictate the market price, effectively squeezing out competition, while at the same time hedging against the ferocious inflation and currency volatility that's so endemic to the region.
That inflation hedge is a really vital point for you, the listener, to grasp. In unstable markets, a business that depends on importing raw materials is constantly facing rising costs because the currency is depreciating.
But if you own the factory and you own the source of the raw material locally, you insulate yourself from that volatility.
You transform an external risk factor into an internal efficiency gain.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the moment that crystallized the absolute necessity of this shift, the catalyst for his manufacturing strategy, was the infamous Nigerian cement armada crisis of the mid-1970s.
This story is often overlooked, but it's the key that unlocks Dangote's entire motivation. Can you describe the scale of that logistical horror?
It was unbelievable. In the mid-1970s, during a major oil boom, the Nigerian government was desperate for rapid infrastructure development. So they authorized massive, almost reckless imports of cement.
And the result was chaos.
Utter chaos. Hundreds of ships carrying millions of tons of cement arrived at the Lagos port all at the same time. The port's capacity was just completely overwhelmed.
So the ships couldn't even unload.
They couldn't move. They just sat there, stranded, sometimes for months, just waiting for a berth. This situation created pure logistical gridlock.
And the government was on the hook for that.
They were liable for enormous demurrage fees. These are astronomical overstay charges you pay to shipping lines for holding up their vessels. The cost of these fees eventually surpassed the value of the cement itself.
It became a national scandal, an economic disaster.
And this was proof that Nigeria's infrastructure and its dependence on foreign bulk imports was fundamentally broken. For Dangote, who was importing cement himself at the time, this crisis meant massive financial losses, but he saw the deeper underlying structural weakness.
He saw the country was holding a gun to its own head, financially speaking.
The lesson was loud and clear. National-scale dependence on importing bulky, necessary commodities is a crippling liability. The real solution wasn't better ports. It was creating a domestic production capacity so vast that external reliance became negligible.
And this realization, it fueled his biggest strategic gamble, which started around the year 2000.
The timing here is so critical. Following the return to civilian rule and the election of Olusegun Obasanjo, Dangote seized the opportunity presented by the government's privatization program.
Right. And he specifically targeted the state-owned Benue Cement Company, or BCC.
Acquiring a struggling state-run enterprise like that requires immense capital and, you could argue, political favor.
It requires both. And it marked his definitive, non-reversible break from simple trading.
He acquired BCC, and then he poured massive amounts of capital into expanding it, modernizing it, and transforming it into the backbone of what would become Dangote Cement.
This was the moment, the definitive transition to large-scale manufacturing and the establishment of a market position that rapidly grew to complete dominance.
He became, and has remained, the largest cement producer in sub-Saharan Africa.
So let's track the financial milestones that came after this industrial pivot. He debuted on the Forbes list in 2008 with a net worth of $3.3 billion. That's a serious validation of the pivot.
It was a powerful start, but the narrative isn't just a straight line up. Even the best constructed empires face macro shocks. His net worth saw a pretty significant drop between 2009 and 2010, which, coincided with the global economic crisis. This showed that his fortune, while based on domestic operations, was still exposed to global capital flows and commodity prices.
But the recovery wasn't just a recovery, it was an explosion of wealth. And that was largely fueled by the strategic listing of Dangote Cement on the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Absolutely. The market listing, which provided a clear valuation and a degree of transparency, at least relative to a private enterprise, it unlocked massive investor confidence.
And that confidence was centered on his industrial strategy.
The market essentially validated the idea that localized, integrated production of essentials in Africa was a far more robust long-term bet than just relying on pure importation.
And the numbers show it. By 2011, his net worth had jumped dramatically to $13.8 billion.
That exponential jump, it speaks volumes about the perceived stability and the, frankly, monopolistic nature of his position. But his fortune is intrinsically linked to the health and the volatility of the Nigerian economy. We saw this illustrated so clearly and so recently in 2024.
Yes, 2024 provided a sharp, immediate illustration of currency risk. We have these October 2025 net worth estimates placing him somewhere between $26 and $30 billion, a major global billionaire.
But the early part of 2024 saw a swift drop of over $1 billion in his estimated wealth.
So why such a swift, dramatic loss?
It was almost entirely due to the severe, rapid devaluation of the Nigerian naira against the US dollar.
Can you explain that?
Think about it this way. Dangote's actual industrial assets, his factories, his land, his equipment, his local revenues, they're primarily denominated in naira. Forbes measures wealth in US dollars. So when the naira collapses in value, even if his businesses are performing well locally, the dollar translation of his wealth shrinks instantly.
So while the factories were still pumping out cement and sugar, his net worth, on paper, took a huge hit because the underlying currency was weakening so rapidly.
It's a perfect example of how his fortune acts as a direct barometer of Nigeria's economic volatility, despite his best efforts to localize production.
Right. But the key takeaway is that the underlying assets, the production capacity, the market dominance, the distribution network, they were so valuable and so deep that the recovery was almost as swift as the drop.
Allowing him to quickly reclaim his position as the wealthiest person in Africa. His empire is fundamentally solid. It's the environment in which it operates that's volatile.
Okay, so we've established the foundation in trade and the huge pivot into industrial goods like cement. Now we arrive at the full, incredible scale of the Dangote empire today.
And it's no longer just a Nigerian operation, is it?
Not at all. It's a vast, diversified conglomerate that operates across key sectors in multiple African countries. We're talking Benin, Cameroon, Ghana, South Africa, Togo.
The scale is just staggering. And every single subsidiary, regardless of the product, adheres to that initial blueprint: market domination through localized, integrated production of necessities.
You really have to look at the specific subsidiaries to understand the sheer breadth of his market control.
Let's start with the industrial backbone. Dangote Cement PX. We've established it as the largest producer in sub-Saharan Africa, but what's critical here is their strategy of decentralized production within the continent.
Right. It's a localized dominance strategy.
They build plants near the raw material sources within the countries they serve, rather than just exporting from Nigeria.
And that does two things. It mitigates cross-border logistical risk, but it also strengthens their hand politically.
Exactly. They contribute directly to local employment and infrastructure in Benin, in Ghana, and so on. It's a calculated strategy of making yourself indispensable to regional development.
Okay, so from cement, we move into the food sector, starting with the colossal Dangote sugar refinery.
This is truly mind-boggling. It is the second largest sugar refinery in the world.
The entire world.
Again, the goal here transcends simple profit. This refinery is designed to contribute significantly to Nigeria's food self-sufficiency goals, drastically reducing the nation's reliance on foreign imports for one of the most basic, high-volume food requirements globally.
And supporting that food security theme is NASCON Allied Industries,
which produces other essential food products like salt and flour. So if you look at the basic commodities that underpin the Nigerian diet and the construction industry, Dangote has a massive, often dominant stake.
It's vertical integration applied to consumption itself. They control the materials you use to build your house, the sugar and salt you put on your food, and the flour you bake with. This level of market saturation gives the group profound resilience.
But he's not just focused on necessities. His reach extends into high-value manufacturing, challenging that old notion that advanced assembly has to be imported. I'm talking about the automotive sector.
That's the indicator of his expansive ambition, isn't it?
It is. The partnership with Stellantis to assemble Peugeot vehicles in Nigeria is a clear move to push the envelope of local industrialization beyond consumables and construction.
It means creating a skilled local workforce and retaining higher value manufacturing within Nigeria.
Further strengthening that made in Nigeria's strategic shift.
So all this diversification, all this scale, was really just setting the stage for what we've called the climax moment, the project that redefined his entire career and is set to fundamentally alter the Nigerian economy, the U.S. $20 billion Dangote refinery and petrochemical complex.
This is the physical manifestation of Dangote's entire life philosophy, just writ large. Commissioned in 2023, it is so much more than just a large building.
It's the single largest oil refinery in Africa, with an incredible processing capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. The sheer scale is difficult for the average person to even comprehend.
So what does 650,000 barrels per day actually mean in practical terms for the West African region?
It means instant energy independence for Nigeria and massive potential for regional exports. For decades, Nigeria, despite being one of the world's major crude oil producers, had this tragic, absurd inefficiency.
It lacks sufficient domestic refining capacity.
Right. So Nigeria exported its crude oil, paid massive fees to ship it overseas, and then imported refined gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel, often subsidized. It created a massive, corruption-riddled leak in the supply chain.
It was an open wound on the national economy.
It was. And the primary transformative goal of the Dangote refinery is to plug that wound. By securing domestic production capacity for refined petroleum products, it promises to revolutionize the fuel market in Nigeria and all of West Africa.
Saving billions in foreign exchange, eliminating costly subsidies, and increasing national energy security basically overnight.
This is the logical, ultimate conclusion of his decades-long pursuit of import substitution. But taken to the highest possible level energy independence. It's one thing to build a cement plant.
It's another thing entirely to build a $20 billion infrastructure project that fundamentally alters a nation's energy security and its geopolitical standing.
And we have to recognize the immense political, technical, and financial resilience that was required to complete it. The project was conceived and began construction during a time when global sentiment for these massive infrastructure projects in Africa was often skeptical.
And it was not an easy build. The sources confirm years of delay and significant cost overruns. A $20 billion project is susceptible to every macro shock imaginable: global pandemic, political instability, changing regulations, inflation.
Exactly. Managing a project of this size, coordinating hundreds of global contractors, securing tens of billions in financing, navigating bureaucratic hurdles, it demands a level of financial and psychological resilience that very few investors possess.
The completion of the refinery, despite all the odds, is unequivocally the greatest milestone of his career. It physically embodies his vision to make Africa produce what it consumes.
It's just staggering to think about that journey, from a handful of sugar candies, through a $3,000 loan, to a $20 billion facility. It forces you to wonder what level of operational focus and sheer psychological resilience must be required to see such a vast, complex vision through to the end.
The scale of success we've discussed, a man who dictates the price of cement, sugar, and soon fuel, that naturally attracts intense scrutiny and criticism.
Of course.
In a complex political and economic environment like Nigeria, building an empire that dominates essential sectors is often intrinsically linked to political connections. And this is the source of the most persistent and unavoidable criticism Dangote faces.
That link between immense business success and political capital. It's the fundamental tension in his narrative, isn't it?
Right.
If the government wants rapid industrialization, isn't some level of political maneuvering or even preferential access necessary to get $20 billion projects built?
Where is the line?
Where's the line between a strategic partnership and undue influence?
That is the core question critics raise. They argue that success on this monumental scale requires, or is only possible, through governmental concessions, regulatory protections, and very close ties with the political elite.
Which leads directly to allegations of favoritism and monopoly. And we have to report these factually.
Let's start with the political concessions that first brought these criticisms into the international spotlight.
Okay.
We're referring to the 2007 diplomatic telegram, which was released by WikiLeaks in 2011. This telegram suggested, based on diplomatic conversations, that Dangote received preferential treatment from the government of the time.
What kind of preferential treatment?
Specifically, it alleged he received exclusive import rights for key commodities, potentially in exchange for financing President Olusegun Obasanjo's 2003 re-election campaign.
And it is so critical for you, the listener, to know the context here. These were internal diplomatic communications. And while powerful, they are allegations. We have to state clearly that Dangote vehemently denied this allegation of a quid pro quo arrangement.
Absolutely. However, the mere existence of the rumor, documented in an official U.S. diplomatic source, instantly cemented a narrative in the public sphere.
A narrative that Dangote's extraordinary business advantage was not purely meritocratic. It was politically secured through preferential policies and access.
And that perception is incredibly difficult to shake, regardless of the denial.
That narrative feeds directly into the concerns about market dominance, or what his critics would just call a monopoly.
Critics like Saadatu Modibo Kawu, the former Director General of the Nigerian Broadcasting Service, they frequently question the source of his massive initial wealth and, more importantly, argue that his vast, subsidized resources effectively suffocate genuine competition in the Nigerian market.
The argument is that only an entity with Dangote's capital reserves can weather the extreme volatility of the Nigerian economy,
Making entry for smaller competitors virtually impossible.
It's the classic argument against unchecked capitalism in a developing environment, that necessary industrial efficiency leads to a dominance so profound it crushes the competitive ecosystem you need for long-term economic health.
And it's difficult to argue against that dominance when you look at the numbers for Dangote Cement, for example. The market share is overwhelming.
And that dominance has raised new, even more critical concerns specifically regarding the new refinery.
While the refinery is designed to solve a huge national problem fuel dependency, it has simultaneously created a potentially unprecedented personal monopoly over the country's essential energy supply.
And these concerns are amplified by widespread discussions, though often difficult to officially confirm, about preferential tax exemptions and regulatory advantages granted by the government specifically to get this multi-billion-dollar refinery project built.
And if a private entity receives special regulatory or fiscal treatment from the state to build infrastructure that then allows them to control a critical national resource, it raises serious questions about regulatory capture.
Where the private sector influences government regulation for its own benefit, even if there's also a public benefit, like energy independence.
Exactly. And moving beyond direct political dealings, there are also the inevitable questions of financial transparency that follow the ultra-rich, especially concerning offshore activities.
The Panama Papers.
Yes, specifically the Panama Papers leak. This global investigation revealed connections between both Aliko Dangote and his brother, Sani Dangote, and various shell companies established in global tax havens.
Now, using offshore entities is a legally common practice among global billionaires for tax planning and asset protection.
It is. But in the context of a developing economy where tax compliance is often low, it naturally raises deep public questions about fiscal transparency and when national wealth is being held and taxed.
This confluence of political allegations, monopoly concerns, and financial complexity. It suggests a high-stakes, high-risk operational environment, and the political battles haven't stopped. They've actually peaked in intensity recently.
The tension was palpable around early 2024. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, investigated the circumstances surrounding major financial transactions connected to the Central Bank of Nigeria scandal.
And Dangote was publicly involved in that investigation.
He was, which fueled widespread rumors regarding his transactions and his alleged influence over state institutions.
He denied any wrongdoing, of course, but the mere involvement of the country's leading anti-graft agency in an inquiry that touched his name just demonstrated his centrality to Nigeria's entire financial power structure. This isn't just a businessman, he's an economic pillar.
And perhaps the most dramatic recent confrontation came with the opening of the refinery. This led to what's being called the oil cartel fight.
This is a remarkable conflict because it positions Dangote not just as a businessman, but as a potential reformer fighting a decades-old corruption machine.
It is a fascinating narrative duality. Dangote publicly and aggressively criticized endemic corruption within Nigeria's deeply entrenched oil sector. He specifically alleged that the reported daily fuel consumption data, which is used for calculating subsidies, was grossly exaggerated.
Implying that billions of dollars were being lost annually to fraudulent subsidy claims and phantom consumption figures.
Engineered by established traders, this was essentially throwing down the gauntlet against the entire old guard of Nigeria's energy sector.
And his public criticism placed him in direct conflict with NNPC Limited, the state oil company, and other established oil traders who have benefited from the old import regime.
Which creates that dual narrative we mentioned. On one hand, Dangote is positioned as a brave national reformer fighting an entrenched mafia or cartel that has systematically bled Nigeria dry. He has the assets and the scale to challenge them directly.
But on the other hand,
the skeptical view is that he is simply attempting to use the unprecedented power of his new refinery to dismantle the old cartel, not for altruistic reasons, but to establish his own new, unchallenged, consolidated fuel monopoly.
The truth is likely somewhere in a complex middle ground. He's simultaneously solving a massive national problem and consolidating unprecedented personal power.
And his story demonstrates that for Dangote, adversity isn't just something to be managed, it's something to be repurposed into a competitive advantage.
Let's circle back to that classic example, the cement armada crisis. He lost millions in demurrage fees because of logistical failure.
And what did he do? He didn't just lobby the government for better ports, he transformed that operational failure into a solution. He invested massively in his own private fleet of trucks and his own freight transport business.
He took on the challenge of Nigerian logistics himself,
creating one of the largest private transport networks in West Africa. He became vertically integrated not just in production, but in the physical movement of his goods,
which ensured he could bypass the inefficiency of state infrastructure and secure his own supply chain reliability,
turning a major operational failure and financial loss into a core, enduring competitive advantage and a successful new line of business. That ability to turn systemic weakness into personal strength is the essence of his industrial genius.
Given the scale of his wealth, the political ties, and all the controversies, it's really essential to examine the ways in which Dangote channels his immense resources outside of his core business operations, primarily through philanthropy.
Which is a huge part of his public image. And his philanthropy is significant. It's institutionalized, channeled primarily through the Dangote Foundation, which operates across Africa.
And the focus is on health, education, and economic empowerment.
The health focus is highly strategic. The foundation has established a significant high-profile working partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on public health initiatives.
Things like vaccination and disease eradication.
Right, and that collaboration gives his foundation global credibility and operational expertise.
We can also track specific, rapid responses to national crises that demonstrate the immediate impact of his private capital.
Absolutely. During the 2014 Ebola outbreak, he contributed 150 million naira for immediate relief efforts. And similarly, a substantial 200 million naira was committed in 2020 towards the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
These are not token gestures. They are rapid, large-scale infusions of capital designed to assist government responses to national emergencies.
And beyond health, there is also the crucial focus on humanitarian aid, particularly addressing the devastating impact of conflict and displacement.
The Boko Haram insurgency.
In 2016, for example, he pledged $10 million specifically to support Nigerians affected by the brutal Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast. This type of aid is vital for stabilization and recovery in conflict-affected regions.
And it proves a commitment that goes far beyond profit motives and extends to the overall integrity of the Nigerian state.
However, the most profound and enduring contribution of Aliko Dangote might be the economic impact of the Dangote Group itself, regardless of the controversies.
Unquestionably. The group is one of Nigeria's largest single private sector employers. It provides hundreds of thousands of jobs, directly and indirectly.
It is a massive, tangible driver of industrialization, and that core strategy of import substitution producing essentials locally rather than importing them is a mechanism designed not just to make him rich.
Right. It's designed to strengthen the local currency by reducing capital flight and to create national self-sufficiency and economic resilience.
It's essentially a private economic policy executed at a national scale. When you can produce everything from sugar to cement to diesel domestically, you are insulating the nation from global market shocks and currency risks.
So let's talk about the man behind this empire. When you have that much power and capital, the personality is often highly scrutinized. What is his leadership approach?
He is consistently described by people who work with him as reserved, non-exhibitionist, intensely focused, and possessing a near-monastic work ethic.
Unlike many global billionaires who embrace a celebrity status, Dangote avoids the flashy displays of wealth.
And we hear about his practical, almost granular understanding of operational details. It's the mindset of the merchant from Kano, but just scaled up exponentially.
He retains a deep understanding of the operational specifics, the cost of logistics, the quality of the limestone, the efficiency of the production line.
He is not a distant, hands-off financier. He is known for being extremely hands-on and practical, demanding efficiency from every corner of the empire.
And in terms of succession, that Dangote tradition of commerce is clearly continuing.
Yes, he has 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 adopted son, and 5 grandchildren. And crucially, his daughter, Halima Dangote, already holds a significant leadership position within the conglomerate.
So that indicates a clear commitment to maintaining family control and ensuring the continuation of the industrial empire for future generations, securing that dynastic commercial legacy.
And on a much lighter, yet I think revealing note, despite his intense focus and reserved demeanor, he does have one very public personal quirk.
His passion for football or soccer.
And his repeatedly stated interest in potentially buying the major English club Arsenal FC.
That ambition, while it seems personal and unrelated to cement or fuel, it really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It shows that even after achieving industrial domination in Africa and becoming an indispensable figure in the continental economy, his global ambitions and his capacity to absorb immense high-value global assets remain undiminished.
So if we step back and look at his enduring legacy, what is the final comprehensive verdict?
He is, without a doubt, the principal architect of Nigeria's modern industrialization. He absolutely proved, definitively, that it is possible to construct and manage a manufacturing and infrastructure empire of truly grand scale within the African context.
He challenged the old colonial models of mere resource extraction.
His emphasis on local production is a powerful inspiration for an entire generation of African entrepreneurs across the continent. He is a symbol of success for young Africans, that global business dominance can be achieved on the continent using local resources and local leadership.
However,
His story remains perhaps the most complex case study in modern African capitalism. His overwhelming influence on the Nigerian economy, serving almost as a national economic barometer, is undeniable.
but his legacy is perpetually weighed down by the criticisms concerning the nature of his access and the market share he commands.
It forces us to ask crucial, unavoidable questions about the balance between necessary, rapid industrial growth and the necessity of promoting fair, vibrant competition in the 21st century global market. The narrative of Dangote is constantly being written, with the success or failure of the $20 billion refinery serving as its current towering chapter. Hashtag, outro, synthesis, and call to action.
Okay, so if we synthesize the 4 decades of strategy and all the complexity we've uncovered, the key takeaway for you, the listener, is this. Dangote's true genius lies not just in recognizing demand, from sugar candies to cement,
but in betting billions on fundamentally changing the structural vulnerability of an entire nation. By relentlessly controlling the supply chain, he transformed national economic dependence into immense personal and regional dominance.
So what does this all mean for the future of African economic development and for global observers of emerging markets? When you look at the rise of economic powerhouses in Nigeria and across the continent, Dangote is the yardstick.
He is.
His success forces us to ask crucial questions about the necessary balance between rapid, massive industrial growth, which Africa desperately needs, and ensuring genuinely fair competition that doesn't merely replace old, corrupt cartels with new private monopolies.
And his story shows us the inherent complexity of progress. The same audacious, necessary project that promises energy independence for Nigeria also consolidates unprecedented control over the nation's essential fuel supply in the hands of one individual.
And that is the provocative thought we want to leave you with, to mull over long after this deep dive ends. When a single private empire becomes indispensable to the stability and basic needs of an entire nation, does that concentration of power represent the ultimate solution for development or the ultimate challenge to democracy and free market ideals?
It is a fascinating dilemma of progress and power that is still unfolding.
If this deep dive gave you a few aha moments and truly deepened your understanding of Aliko Dangote's complex empire, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep exploration into the people and forces shaping our world. We appreciate you diving in with us.